Jackson State's 2023 football season is in the books, so let's take a look back at the first year in the TC Taylor era. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey's over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Now, we'll wrap up today's episode with a look back at the first time that FAMU and PV squared off before looking at the game tomorrow for our game of the week. Prior to that, Hue Jackson's firing at Grambling after only 2 seasons has sparked an interesting conversation. How much time does a new head coach deserve? But prior to any of that, speaking of new head coaches, TC Taylor just finished his first year as the Jackson State head football coach. So let's break down his era. To me, it went solid. It went the way it was supposed to go. And there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think that year could have been so much better with just one extra victory. And you pick which game it was. It doesn't matter. If you go from 7-4 to 8-3, I think we're looking at the first year of the TC Taylor era in so much higher regard, right? I would love to know what you think about it. Not only my opinion on it, but his year in general. But when I look at it, it went the way it was supposed to go. Jackson State season is one of the reasons I don't really like recruiting talk. It's not something that I prefer to do. It's something that is a big deal, so we discuss it a lot of times, but it's not my cup of tea. Other people like it. That's fine. I don't knock that. But for me, recruiting talk just isn't it for me. It's a lot of projections and it's just too much guesswork, in my opinion, on some things that people probably don't know much about. If you were to pay attention to some of the preseason talk around the Jackson State recruiting class, you would have thought they were going for their 3rd championship in a row. And I don't think that was ever fair, though I consistently said we don't know anything about Jackson State, and the recruiting class was one of the reasons why. I also kept saying, hey, you might want to temper down expectations. If you're expecting TC to come in and win 10 games, I don't know if that's fair to him. I don't think it's fair for a first-year coach going through a complete overhaul. And I think that those who looked at it with a level mind agreed with me. And I think that sometimes we can get caught up in our fandom and we might lose the real expectations or really lose a grip of reality. There were so many things that TC Taylor had to overcome that I think that 7-4 was a pretty solid record for him. And it's about where I expected him to be, right? I think that's giving him leeway of buying in the hype of calling him a good head coach and being able to make the right calls. Like, I think that 7-4 is a good season, right? But when you look at how they got to the 7-4 as a team, the reason there's so much room for improvement. Also, I want to say this about the transfer portal and about the recruiting. I think with transfer portal additions, sometimes it feels like things should be instant, and it's not. So that's my problem, is that it feels like something that should be instant. And that's why you might have thought it was going to be immediate for them. But these things take time to come together. Now we can move on into the season and the record. If you look at with just a little bit of awareness on how HBCU football transpired this year, not prior to the season, but in the season, they played South Carolina State, FAMU, Southern, Texas State, Bethune-Cookman, Alabama A&M, Alabama State, Mississippi Valley State, University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, Texas Southern, and Alcorn. They went 7-4. And I didn't tell you the win-loss for any of those games. And if you stopped me right now, I bet you could guess which games they won and which games they lost, because they won every game they were supposed to win if you're a halfway decent team. And then they lost all the games they were supposed to lose. Or excuse me, they lost all the other games. They were supposed to lose to FAMU and Texas State. They were supposed to lose to FAMU and Texas State. I thought that Alabama State was up in the air, and I thought that Alcorn was up in the air. And you lost both of those games. That's why it can't be a great year, because you didn't beat any good teams. Maybe you want to say South Carolina State. I'm not sure, but definitely not at that point. They weren't a good team. I don't think the Southern ever really became a good team. Texas Southern, for me, they didn't have body. I like Ladarius Owens, but when you don't have your starting quarterback, it can be very difficult. But shout out to Jace Wilson for winning the newcomer of the year, right? Shout out to you for that. That's a big deal. But overall, they didn't beat anybody for real. I thought that this year was a nice foundation. 7-4 definitely looks good. But that's about it for me, right? So Chris Rock has this joke where he's talking about how folks, and I'm going to censor it, but folks always want some credit for some things they supposed to do. And he used an example of somebody taking care of his kids. So, man, I take care of my kids. And Chris Rock like, you supposed to, you low expectation having, you know what? Like, this is not TC Taylor taking care of the kids. I think that we do need to commend him, because this easily could have been a 3-win team. This was a complete overhaul. There shouldn't, I think if I'm using the idea that they are a halfway decent team, they beat all the teams that they were supposed to, you got to give them credit for that, because you could have slipped up. You could have lost to a Bethune. You could have lost to a Texas Southern, and you were in a fight with some of these teams, right? You didn't have the quarterback that you probably should have had. I don't know if I can give him credit for finding the guy, because, you know, he was probably part of picking the first guy in the first place. So I don't know, kind of a net negative, or excuse me, a net 0. But overall, you didn't let this ship fall apart. You did not let the ship fall apart. At the end of the day, everything could have crumbled for you. Everything could have fell apart, but you chose to keep driving that ship, and you drove it in the right direction. Now you chose to, but you drove the ship in the right direction. That has to be credited, from my opinion, right? Like, we can criticize him for not beating Alcorn, not beating FAMU, not beating Alabama State. Like, we can criticize him for that all you want. But this is the first year for a first-year head coach. This isn't just his first year at Jackson State. It's his first year in this role in any capacity at any school. To me, this is a solid year. This is a foundational year. And now from here, we get to watch to see if they can grow. Then we start saying, okay, you need to win some of these competitive games. To me, going from 7-4 to 8-3 means you beat a FAMU or a Texas State or an Alabama State or an Alcorn. And I think if you do that, your year looks so much better. It really does. But because you weren't, still a good foundational year, you just clearly see where you have the room to grow. And that's winning a big time game or winning against a good opponent. And we'll see if they can do that in 2024. Now, one person who won't have a chance to do that in 2024, but I believe that's the reason that he did get fired, is Hue Jackson. Grambling State let go of him, and we'll do a little bit of more diving into why the firing might have happened. But most importantly, how much time does a new coach get? I got the answer for that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, and eBay Motors is here to help you either fix your car or just make your car better. You don't always have to have something wrong with it, but let's say that your alternator is gone bad. Okay, cool. Go ahead and go to eBay Motors, and you can pick it. 2007 Cadillac Escalade, go ahead and put that in my garage section, and from there, you'll get the parts that fit your car. And it's simple. My fit, or the guaranteed fit, is there for the U.S. customers only. Now, say you want to add some neon lights under your car, you can do that as well. Everything is available, whether you need to fix it, and they'll have the right fit guarantee for you. If it's not, money back guarantee, but it's going to fit, so you ain't got to worry about it. But then also, if you just want to make additions to your car, maybe some new wheels, maybe some lights on the inside, all of these things can be used to make your car better, either aesthetically or then also actually how it runs. So go ahead and go to ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Either fix your car or do it up. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, Locked on Sports Today has the first ever 24/7 podcast stream. That means it doesn't matter if you do it right when you wake up or right before you go to sleep. You will have a podcast to listen to on Locked on Sports Today. So check it out. Only Locked On is doing this. Hue Jackson has been fired. Say what you want to say about it. Premature. I do think it's a tad bit premature. But that being said, this has sparked an interesting conversation. We looked at the actual decision on yesterday's episode. It was the lead segment. I really am happy with that one. I ain't gonna lie. I really was happy with how that came out. But now we have a new question. How much time should a new coach have before getting fired? And to me, the answer is on average 3 years. And I might even say the minimum of 3 years and say that exceptions do apply. It's very few, but for example, legal issues, off the field issues, whatever, just a complete difference of opinion between leadership and coaching. Those things do not apply. But if we're just talking about on-field performance, to me, I believe that 3 years is a good amount of time. And it's also a case-by-case basis. For example, when Dooley got fired at Southern, nobody batted a freaking eye. Maybe it's because people have been asking for Dooley to be fired all year, but he was only in there for 2 years as well, and nobody seemed to care. Nobody. I was the only one who's like, man, this guy had a SWAC championship last year. Not a SWAC championship, excuse me, a SWAC championship appearance last year. This year he's fired. I just wrote it off to me being in a poverty team as far as football goes. I'm gonna keep it a bean with you. We ain't been good. I get a SWAC championship, you good for life. Even a SWAC championship appearance, you good with me for the next couple of years. You definitely ain't getting fired the following season. But hey, is what it is, right? Now, when you look at Hue Jackson, I think that Grambling's past has led them to this because you got to look at the expectations of a university too. I saw this interesting stat, and it was about the success of second-year head coaches at Grambling. Here we go. Doug Williams, the first time he coached, 7-4. Melvin Spears, 11-1. Rod Broadway, 11-2. Doug Williams, the second time he coached, 1-10. Broderick Fobbs, 9-3. Hue Jackson, 5-6. I'll be honest with you. You're not Doug. You're not Doug. At the end, you're not Doug. I don't care if you're talking about as a coach or if you're talking about as a player. What Doug Williams means to Grambling, you're not him. So let's just use Doug as the exception, the second go around. And let's not even to mention that he had a lot more success the first time. And then Doug said that he didn't get fired because of on-field performance. It was off-the-field stuff. But I don't want to hear anybody saying, well, Doug went 1-10 and we didn't fire him. Hue Jackson ain't Doug Williams. Does that need to be explained? Like, you get certain leeways when you have certain stature at these places. That's just the God's honest, okay? But maybe you're looking at a list of coaches and Grambling saying, you know what? We know what success is supposed to look like, and it don't look like this. And I do believe that Hue Jackson's record is misleading. I do believe that it didn't look great. I do believe that there was some frustrations. I would have had him on the hot seat in year 3. I wasn't happy with Hue Jackson. I just thought 2 years was too soon. I thought that you saw some things changing. You still didn't win the big one. And at the end of the day, you could, if you win the Bayou Classic, you probably win. Or you're probably still here, I should say. If you win the Bayou Classic, I think that Grambling is still employing Hue Jackson. But because you didn't, it continued a trend of not being able to win the big games. It continued this trend that then told the decision makers, all right, you're not destined for greatness. We're going to go ahead and get you out of here and try to find somebody else. Premature, in my opinion. Premature, in my opinion. But Hue Jackson came out and he had a quote about it, and one that I thought was interesting. Let me see that I have it. Okay, here we go. He's talking about how you need 3 years to turn around a program. You have to give it 3 years. When you come in the first year, you don't want to walk in and run all the players out. There's players that you need to evaluate. There's players that and families that are tied to this place. And he's not just talking about Grambling. He's talking about everywhere. He made that clear. But he said you want to make sure you understand the lay of the land. And I would have felt, though, it was warranted to be fired if this year, year 2, had looked like the first year. I love that last line because it's awareness. It's saying, look, if things were just terrible, cool, get me out of here. I deserve that. But it wasn't, because he's right. Things weren't terrible. He spoke about how the culture seemed to be improving and changing. Those things don't happen immediately. You can't come in year 1, just change the culture. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to it, but most people aren't going to do that. So you also got to look at it's all about expectations here. I think with Grambling, they're sitting there like, this is Hue Jackson, an NFL head coach. And if you want to put him along the lines of a George, along the lines of a Sanders, they don't have the coaching experience that Hue Jackson has. So maybe Grambling's sitting here saying, hey, we expect you to turn around earlier than you did. We know what we think things should look like, and you're not having it look that way. And you're already a coach established. You're not going to change. This is the trajectory that you're on, and we don't like where it's headed. We're going to go ahead and cut bait. I don't like it, but maybe Grambling has seen the 11-2s. Maybe Grambling has seen the SWAC championships. Maybe Grambling has seen a lot more things than we have. Maybe they've seen structural issues that are beyond repair. I don't think that 2 years was enough time, but I'm trying to make sense of the decision that was made and try to figure out some of the reasons that Grambling could have had to have made them. That's all I'm here to do. That's all I'm here to do. Grambling is back to building up. We'll see. But overall, to answer the question, I think that 3 years is good. He's right. You don't want to come in and just tear everything off the wall in year 1. You want to come in and evaluate. I think that you don't even really get a chance to work with your guys if you're not there for 3 years, because most of them aren't going to play as freshmen. If they get to come in as a sophomore, as a redshirt freshman, now you get 1 year with them, and you don't even get to come back for their second year. You're not even getting to see them for a second year of action. I think that's too quick. I think there's a lot of things to look at. But to answer the question that I thought was so interesting, how many years does a new coach deserve? And the answer to me is 3. Hue Jackson got 2. There's some reasons for that, and we'll look at them as time goes on. I'm sure they'll expose themselves more, but I don't think that this was enough time. Hue Jackson doesn't think that this was enough time, and a lot of other people don't either. Let me know what you think, though. And we'll look at another team. Now we're going to kind of get away from coaches. We're going to go to teams, and we're going to look at FAMU and Prairie View, 2 other teams that are inside the SWAC and battling for the SWAC championship as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy, and it's simple to play. Very simple to play. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and they're going to have more or less than whatever their entry is. And sometimes you have the combo picks. So you might have a Travis Kelce, and you might have a Austin Reeves, right? You might have those 2 players together and combine 3-pointers and touchdowns, or 3-pointers and catches. There's things like that I think make Prize Picks so interesting and so different from these other places. I love them for that. And what I really do appreciate is that they won't take your money because your guy got hurt. Hey, Jonathan Taylor got hurt in this game. We're not going to charge you for it. Don't worry about it. I know that's the reason you lost. That's great system. I love it. I love it. I love it. So you would too if you go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use the code lockedoncollege, and you'll get an extra, you get your first deposit matched up to $100. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Now, you're going to watch FAMU versus Prairie View A&M for the second time this year on Saturday. I'm going to be previewing that second matchup tomorrow. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look back at the first time that these two teams faced off, and it was a blowout. It was ugly. FAMU absolutely dominated Prairie View on FAMU's homecoming. It was a great moment. I think they might have. I think they clinched the SWAC West that day. This was great. And I've been on record. I ain't finna sit here in front with you. I'm on record saying I didn't want to watch this game again. I still don't want to watch this game again. But we're here. So let's look at what happened the first time. Because the first go around, it was a beatdown. So I want to look at how much stock you can put into it. From a FAMU perspective, everything that I did in that game is going to be my first game plan. Meaning you're going to have to show me you can stop it. And maybe you can. I'm not going to go in there and be stubborn and maybe I beat you with post routes every time. And I'm just going to keep running post routes, right? Like I am going to do it multiple times to see if you can continue to stop it, but I'm not going to rely on everything I did. And if that doesn't work, all of a sudden I'm stuck. And I think that Willie Simmons is a good enough coach, a good enough offensive mind specifically to where he won't do that either. I expect to see Simmons come out and give very similar looks to what he did the first time they played. A, to see if they could stop it, but then B, to then come in and say, you know what? We know you think this is coming because in the first game, whenever we lined up like this, this is what we did. In the first quarter, we lined up like this and we did the same thing. Now that the second quarter is here, we're going to break tendency and do something different while giving you the same look because now you think you know what's coming. All right, cool. Let's switch it up. But it's got to look the same. And as an offensive mind, I do trust that Willie Simmons will be able to do that. I think it's important not to get too married to that game. If you're FAMU or if you're Prairie View, like for PV, a lot of things went wrong. You have to use that as real game tape. You have to come in and you have to evaluate. You have to say, all right, where did they beat me at? I can't let them beat me here again. FAMU should come in and say, I'm going to try to beat you there again. From a fan perspective, I don't know how much you guys really learned from that. Coming into the game, who did you think was going to be the better team? Coming out of that game, who did you feel was the better team? Coming into this game, who do you feel is the better team? The answer to all three of those questions is FAMU. Now the only question left is, can FAMU replicate that type of performance? It likely won't be a 35 or a 38-point victory, but will they be able to replicate the same level of dominance, and will they come out victorious? Who is the best team going into that game? Who's the best team going out of that game? Who's the best team going into this game? That's the same answer, but will that be the same answer as who's going to be the best team coming out of this game? Because that's where things kind of change. So, yeah, I think that FAMU is going to come in with the same game plan or a similar game plan. If PV can't stop it at all, that's a PV problem. And it wouldn't shock me if PV couldn't stop it. I'm not going to abandon certain advantages just in the name of being different. I'm still going to attack the secondary. I'm still going to do that. I thought that Jeremy Musa had a really explosive game and one of his better ones. When you look at him, he went 14 for 25 and over 270 yards. He had nearly 20 yards per completion. This was a very good mix of efficiency and explosiveness. 20 yards or 19 point whatever it was is his best yards per completion all year long, right? His 3 touchdowns was his most in a SWAC game all year long. His completion percentage was decent, but it's more so what he did with those completions as opposed to how many he completed. When you're looking at his other yardage, his high yardage, they all come with a lot of attempts. He only threw the ball 25 times this game. That's the type of matchup, or that's the type of game that you want from him again. And this is the type of matchup you would want to replicate because you've seen the success and you have to go back to the well of doing those things. And you got to hope that he makes the throws. A lot of times the problems have just been, all right, Musa, make that throw. When I watch FAMU, I've seen players open. It's just about hitting the guy a lot of times, you know? And I think that Musa does it more than people give him credit for. But it has also been an issue at times in their offense. So, yeah, I think that from the first game, you have to treat it like regular game film. What did I do well? What did I do poorly? How can I improve? Specifically because we're looking at going against the same opponent. That's it. And I think the improvement is more so on FAMU, or excuse me, more so on PV, and then just sticking with the game plan and just replicating execution is on FAMU. Now, tomorrow's episode, we'll get a little bit more specific. I didn't want to be overly dialed in because, we're going to talk about this game tomorrow, and I didn't want to give you the same facts again. So we'll do that on tomorrow's episode, the game of the week, the final, or no, second to last game of the week for our football season. I can't wait. I'm missing it already, even though it's not gone yet. But in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, don't miss me. You can find me on Twitter, X, or whatever the heck you want to call it, at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.